How's it guys, this is Dayvy FC and welcome back to the Euro 2020 fantasy video. Now in this video, I'll be covering a wildcard draft for those of you who still do have the chip. It seems like no one has the wildcard chip, so hopefully there are a couple of you guys out there that still do have it, as I'm really jealous of the wildcard draft that I managed to make up in a short amount of time. So as you know, with me, I used my wildcard, I think it was in match day 3 or game week 3, or if you want to call it the last matches of the group stage, and I think it was actually quite a successful wildcard, so not really regretting it, but a hint of suspicion of jealousy is kind of creeping in when I did make this draft, because as of yet, I currently have 9 players out, so I really do need a wildcard to be honest. So hopefully this video addresses those of you with the chip, but also those of you without the chip, because if you like me, I'm going to be taking a lot of hits this match day, so I basically have a free wildcard. It just costs me a couple of points. So hopefully in this video you guys get some insight. I'm going to be covering the defensive stats, the clean sheet odds, then going to be going on to the attacking odds like we have kind of done in these recent wildcard drafts, previews, team selections. I think they're actually quite useful to kind of look at the betting odds to make your kind of fantasy decisions, and then we'll finally be moving on to the draft and I'll be taking you guys through each single player and why I've opted for those respective nations. So that's something you're interested in, sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So quickly, I wanted to touch on this talking point of the Limitless Chip. So I did get some questions over on Twitter and on YouTube about please do a Limitless draft because I still do have the chip. So the Limitless Chip, I just want to give some context here. I would only be using the Limitless Chip, one, if I was super sure that I'll be fine next game week, and secondly, if I did still also have the wild card. So I would suggest if you still have both chips to use the Limitless this week and then use the wild card next week. And the reason I'm saying this is that it's similar to why I used the chips in the group stages. In the quarterfinals versus the semifinals, you have one more fixtures and also you have a bigger kind of difference or delta between the two teams' rankings. I know rankings doesn't mean much in the Euro 2020s this year. We've kind of had some massive upsets. Netherlands, France, those sort of teams have been knocked out by a relatively lesser opposition. I'm not kind of downgrading those nations that beat them, but it is true they are lower ranked on the UEFA rankings and the FIFA rankings. So that's just kind of the metric that we have been going on. But with the Limitless, we have some really good matchups in the quarterfinals that I think you can take more advantage of with an unlimited budget versus using it in the semifinals or the finals where there's less fixtures and less variance to kind of the players that people are going for. So that's why I kind of said use the Limitless this week, but I would not be using the Limitless, or at least I'd be more cautious of using the Limitless if I did not have the wild card. And why I'm saying this is that the Limitless is a free hit. So what happens is that you only have that team for one specific game week. So what's going to happen? You're going to use your Limitless in the quarterfinals, then the semifinals come around and you still have your round of 16 teams. And theoretically, that means a lower reduction of nations and therefore less fantasy players in your starting 11. So if you think with 5 free transfers you're going to be fine, then by all means use the Limitless chip this week, but I would just raise caution on it and I might save it for the semifinals or the finals because I think that's just going to be a little bit of a safer strategy. Yes, you're going to get less points of it, but one, you're also going to have to take less hits, and the second reason is at least you'll manage to get a couple of players for the quarterfinals and the semis and the finals exactly how you want to use it. So that's just kind of my word of advice here. So unfortunately I won't be doing a Limitless draft, but I do think the wildcard draft that I've managed to make is going to be quite similar if I was to use the Limitless as well. So you can kind of use this as a Limitless / wildcard draft video, and hopefully it's accessible and kind of fits to your strategy and your budget. Now moving on to the talking point, which is going to be the qualification odds. I mentioned this in the team selections. If you guys watched it yesterday, I just skip ahead to the next talking point because I'll be kind of explaining it again for those of you who hopefully have been new viewers to the channel. So what I did here was I went over to a betting site. No, I'm not advocating betting here. I just use it simply as a kind of fantasy metric to adjust the fixtures and see what fixtures I should be targeting. So on the left hand side we have the first team, and on the right hand side we have the second team, and on the right and left columns of the middle under qualification 1 and qualification 2 I have the odds of that specific nation qualifying. And then in the middle what I've done is I've taken an absolute value of those two qualification odds, because the bigger the difference in the two teams odds, theoretically, the bigger the scores should be. I know that might not be the case. England sometimes are quite boring in their attack, but I do think against Ukraine, I can heavily rely on them to get some results from a defensive and an attacking point of view. And that's why their fixture has the highest delta. 8.5, double then the next highest, which is going to be Spain versus Switzerland. And then you can also see Belgium versus Italy is almost a fixture to avoid. And that's just because it's too hard to call at the moment. Both sides have similar rankings. I think that game's going to be super tight. Denmark, Czech Republic, I think there is potential for some differentials, but I definitely think the Spain game and the England game should be the games that you guys are targeting. Maybe not from a defensive point of view for Spain, because their defense has been a little bit leaky. Unless they keep a lot of possession like they did in the group stages against Switzerland, that should reduce the chance of Switzerland scoring, and maybe Spain can keep a clean sheet if Simon doesn't concede another own goal, as I mentioned in the team selection yesterday. So Spain, I really do like their attack. In terms of the stats, they have some of the best, if not the best, attacking stats in the Euro competition this year. So I do think a triple up, a double up, if you want to go 4 players from Spain, that could even work. And the main reason for that is that we do get the Spanish lineup before the deadline. This has been an integral part to our kind of drafts, our team selections, is that we do get the first fixtures lineup before the deadline actually closes. So if you want to go for some Swiss players, some Spanish players, just wait till the deadline so we can make sure those specific players are starting. But I think the front three will probably be similar to Morata, Sarabia, Ferran Torres, that sort of thing. So maybe prepare those players right now, and you can simply switch them out if there has been some rotation in that Spanish front line. But the Spain game, really good game, but the best game to target is going to be England versus the Ukraine. If you want to have some good odds here and want to go for some low probability, go for Ukraine winning this fixture, because England are the massive favorite against the Ukraine, and I can kind of back that. I think that this is going to be an easy game for England, and if you are on a wild card, I would really suggest going with 4 or 5 players from England. And the reason I'm saying that is that if you have been careful or conservative enough to keep your wild card till this point, you might not be that much of an outright manager going for 4 or 5 players from a specific team, but I think you have to, just because this fixture is so good. And not only is this fixture great, who do England face if they go through? Denmark or Czech Republic, and theoretically, I know this doesn't always happen, but England will yet again be the odds-on favorite to progress to the final. Currently the favorite to win the whole Euro competition, so I think you have to back England. And on a wild card, not many players are going to own 4 or 5 English players if they don't have a wild card, so you might as well take the punt. And on a low risk fixture, in my opinion, England versus Ukraine provides that perfect opportunity. The Denmark-Czech game, as I mentioned, could be some differentials, and I would personally try and get at a minimum 1 or 2 Italian or Belgian players, because I think that fixture is too hard to call, and I can honestly see both teams progressing. So now moving on to the more defensive side of things, I've gone for the clean sheet odds here, and the metric that I took for this was win to nil, or the odds that the team wins to a score of nil from the opposition team. Now this might not be the best representation of that team keeping a clean sheet, because you can also have a 0-0 draw, for example, but I think in terms of a comparison matrix between the kind of fixtures, I think this is perfectly fine to do. So we can see here in the green, almost light green, if you are colorblind, can't see red or green, I just look at kind of the scores, and the lower the score, the better chance that team has of getting a clean sheet. And you can see England are the number 1 team here in terms of the rankings to keep a clean sheet against Ukraine, and the second team is going to be Spain. That's closely followed by Denmark though, so if you want to go for maybe a Denmark defender, as we have done, spoiler alert, in our wildcard draft, then you can do that. And I would personally avoid that Belgium-Italy game, or maybe have 1 defender from Belgium and Italy to just spread the risk a little bit, because as you can see, both sides have a medium kind of a chance of keeping a clean sheet, and I don't know if I'll be banking on a clean sheet from either of these 2 teams, to be honest. So in terms of the clean sheets, just use this for those defenders. If you want to go for a defender with some good odds, go for England, or I would go for Spain or Denmark. But what I would try and do is incorporate some attacking personality into that. So maybe go for a Mailer, or go for a Jordi Alba from Spain or Denmark, because I think that kind of lowers your risk of not getting a return, because then you have the defensive ratings and you also have the attacking ratings. So now finally moving on to the wildcard draft, or at least my best attempt at a wildcard draft. As I mentioned in the introduction, was really jealous of creating this squad and kind of getting it for free if you do have the wildcard, because I think this team could lead to some absolutely massive scores. So starting off in goal, I've gone for Simon and then also Schmeichel. Reason behind that, I think that Simon or Schmeichel have a relatively good chance of keeping a clean sheet, and both of them are quite cheap. I didn't kind of want to splash the cash here and go for maybe a more expensive Pickford, although Pickford does come come in a little bit more expensive, not that much more expensive. But a Thibaut Courtois, Donnarumma, that's a hard fixture to be honest. So I think Simon and Schmeichel should be perfectly fine for you guys, and I think that hopefully one of them will keep a clean sheet. Also, the fixtures look quite good. Switzerland, Czech Republic, as I mentioned, one of these two should hopefully keep a clean sheet, and that should be quite good in our books. The rest of the defense, I've gone for Luke Shaw and John Stones as a double up, because I think that England team has a really good chance of keeping a clean sheet, and we saw last week how Luke Shaw was so good from an attacking point of view that, I mean, you can't even rule out him getting an assist or maybe even a goal. The other two defenders in our starting 11 are going to be Spinazzola and also Mæhle from Denmark. Against the Czech Republic, we saw last week how attacking Mæhle was, and Spinazzola is also not too shabby from an attacking point of view. Unfortunately, that fixture is against Belgium, who have been quite free scoring recently, so I think it's going to be really hard for Italy, maybe not to keep a clean sheet there, but after losing that kind of record of clean sheets in extra time in this round of 16, maybe that's kind of a curse for them now, and from a defensive point of view, they're not going to be that strong. The last defender on the bench there is a Meunier from Belgium. I think he's a shoo-in to start, so you don't have to worry about rotation there. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, is against Italy, but I've only included one Italian attacker here, so maybe Meunier can keep a clean sheet. The midfield department, we've got some nice variation here of expensive and cheaper options. Starting off with Raheem Sterling, England's basically only goal scorer in the Euro 2020s, and I'm actually favouring him to get on the score sheet yet again against the Ukraine side that I think they can put a couple past. Then my double up in the midfield of Spanish assets, Sarabia and Ferran Torres. Both of these two assets looked really strong, so I would suggest maybe going with one or two of them in midfield, and then the last midfield in the starting 11 is going to be Insigne from Italy, because I just wanted some Italian flavour in the front department, because I still think that Italy will score and I'll hopefully go on to win this fixture. The last midfielder is going to be Mason Mount, because I think he should return to the lineup after testing positive. And you know Southgate, he absolutely loves Mason Mount, so I think he goes straight back into that starting 11. The front line I'm really excited about. Firstly, Harry Kane, who managed to get off the mark against Germany, and if he can score against Germany, hopefully he can do the same against a Ukraine side that have been a little bit questionable in that defensive department. The last two strikers, first of all, Morata from Spain. Really happy for him that he managed to get a goal in the round of 16, and from a stats point of view, looks really strong. So I would suggest going with Morata if you have an open space in that front line. And the last player is going to be Schick from Czech Republic. I know I've kind of backed Schmeichel here, said he's going to get a clean sheet, but with Schick's form and the Czech Republic's form, I can reckon that they might be able to squeeze 1 or 2 goals against the Danish defense. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this wildcard draft. I actually really enjoyed kind of creating it, because it opened my eyes to see what players I can target with those free transfers, and more importantly, those hits or those -4 hits that I'll probably be taking a couple of before the quarterfinals deadline. So this is basically a wrap of the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you're new and have not subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow for the deadline stream, an hour before the deadline. So as I said, hopefully see you there. I'm going to be signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers. Bye.